been receiving lately is about union and thinking of it like a coin. And there seems to be so many different opinions on what that means for twin flames, but a common definition of union is that it's about being in a relationship with your 5D self, your higher self. And while I believe this is a big part of union, and I'll state this as my belief, so just take it as it feels true for you, I believe it's only one side of the coin, so to speak, with the 3D, the physical, being the other side. Definitely being in a loving relationship with my inner being is the first step, really trying to be open to my intuitive guidance at all times, even outside of meditation. That's my spiritual guidance. And some may call that inner union, and I agree with that, but would like to add as a twin flame, inner union involves my other experiencer and their higher self, our higher self, because like the coin, we can each be one side of the coin, but we are still a whole. And some do believe that inner union is all union is, and they leave it there. They say, I'm in union with my other self in the 5D, and that's that. But that's, to me, often where the physical side of our journey gets discounted. Because the flip side of the coin is the physical experience. The coin being my soul, one side is my spiritual essence with which my higher self is always aligned. Then there's the other side of the coin, which is my physical, with which my higher self is aligned in the potential of. So just as I'm practicing being open to my intuitive guidance at all times, I'm also allowing my egoic mind to balance into that harmoniously. It's both sides of the coin. But to take it a step further, there's an equally important part that follows coming into that inner union that it seems often gets overlooked. And as we experience our journey, many of us go through what is commonly referred to as separation. But if you've watched some of my other videos, then you may have heard me call it balancing or bridging instead of separation. And during this time, I believe we're led to heal the things that we recognize during our activation, those traumas, wounds, lower vibrations that consistently show up in our day-to-day lives. But during bridging, I believe we learn balancing in our lives with our unique authenticity in the midst of those things that caused triggering. Because we're not meant to shut everything out and avoid things or people that can feel are in a lower vibration to us. We're actually meant to learn this balancing as a way of being able to interact with those lower vibrations and still maintain our soul's vibrational frequency, or at least get back to it easily, like as if it's natural, because it is natural. And to go even further, when we're able to do this, we're helping raise the lower vibrations we interact with. Like I've read how some people say they've given up TV, social media altogether, and they don't put themselves in situations where they'll be confronted with lower vibrational experiences. And I think in the beginning, we may need to do that until we're well practiced in maintaining higher vibrations. And of course, that's a personal choice. But long before my spiritual awakening, I pretty much stopped using social media just because I didn't care for the ingenuine side most people put forth and how many people use it as a crutch to get around being disconnected. Like everything, having balance with it is helpful, but if you completely shut it out to avoid messing up your vibration in consistent balancing, you miss the point if you keep it that way. And that's what's at the heart of this message here. This isn't just spiritual where you confine yourself to the spiritual experience of it. That's why I say, yeah, we call it a spiritual journey, but it's actually physical just as much as it is spiritual. That's why we are experiencing a spiritual journey on the physical plane, because my higher self doesn't need a spiritual journey. It's my physical ego, my mind, body, and emotions that need to bring back the spiritual balance within my life, because that's my soul. So at some point, you've got to work through the physical side of things, because that's what brings it all together, in my opinion. But there's still more. This is the part I was recently shown, and I go into some of this with my video, The Key to Everything, which was part 21 of Soul Spark, where I talk about how we're being led to open our hearts. But I got a little more after I did that video about how when we first get into that stage of what feels like separation, we tend to isolate. And we open to the spiritual essence of the soul, the one side of the coin, we learn that the answers we seek are found within, and we find new strength in our realization of self as a spiritual being. And it's incredible. I mean, it's just, we get so much empowerment from that, and it's really just a beautiful experience. We get to that place of inner union, and for many people, when we get to that place, it's easy to think we don't need anyone but ourselves, or we're better off without others interfering. We tell ourselves we're good alone. And this is just my experience, but before I met my twin flame, I actually went through a dark night of the soul, a huge one, and I call it the ego check. It's another thing you may have heard in my other videos, but I don't like saying dark night of the soul or ego death because we do need our ego. It's part of our design. So I call it the ego check because we're just meant to get it in check. But I went through that before meeting my twin, and then a lesser intense one after meeting him. But I was always a very independent person, and actually had a friend tell me at one time that I needed to learn to ask people for help, that it was okay to ask for help because I saw that as being weak. And I was okay doing everything alone. I did have a couple of friends I did things with, and there's nothing wrong with that though. I think it's great. You should feel good doing things by yourself sometimes, but I could take it to the extreme where it didn't phase me to cut people off. Like if they didn't fit into my world anymore, I would often just let people go. And that's needed at some points of our journey. A lot of our growth, I think, does need to happen without that direct physical interaction because it does teach us so much about ourselves. Like we learn so much by being in that isolation. But I had been that way my whole life already. So for me, I think I've been learning quite the opposite. But in that experience, I got humbled and I had to ask for help from friends and family. And that was the first time for me. And I had this one experience where I had to pay a bill, and I had two part-time jobs at the time, because I hadn't been able to find a full-time job after moving. And, like I said, I went through that dark night of the soul. Everything changed. And so I had a hard time finding work for a while. So I had two part-time jobs at the time, and one of them had not been paying on time. And they told us that we were getting paid on this particular day, but it had not shown up in my account yet, and I was getting nervous. So I texted my sister to ask her if I could borrow a few dollars because I had a bill paying out the next day. And I was only short like $5, but she was working. I didn't hear back from her. So I either had to be late with my bill, which was a credit card bill, and end up with more charges, and it was just going to be outrageous, or I could do something else, which I really, really didn't want to do, which was ask my stepdad for $6 to just make sure everything was covered. So for him, money is an influencer in his relationships. Like that's how he builds his relationships. But another delightful side of him is that he wants to probe and nitpick. And when my sisters have asked him for money in the past, he's been known to hold it over their heads. I mean, not like continuously, but it would get brought up occasionally. And so he asked me, $6? What do you need $6 for? Like he kept just saying $6 over and over. And he said, I don't understand why you need $6. You don't have $6? And I tried to keep calm, like from losing my shit. And I explained, I do have $6, but I need $6 more. He just wanted me to grovel. And I think probably because I was always the independent one, I hadn't needed to rely on him for really anything after I moved out from their place when I was 16. I moved into my dad's house. And so this probably really fed his ego because he knew about the issue with the company not paying. And, like they ended up getting shut down, but I always felt like he thought I was lying about that job because it was work from home and I rarely had to go to a place of business. And this was before COVID, so that sort of thing was just weird to him. But he made a big deal about the $6, just like I knew he would. And it was just so hard for me to do, to ask him of all people. Like, he wants to be helpful, but only if he can torture you in the process. So after I came out of that whole experience, I could appreciate the humility I gained from it. And I actually learned to think of money differently too. Like it really became less important to me. But, yeah, I mean, this has definitely been a big part of my healing and still is, especially the relationships part of it. But after that first ego check, I began rebuilding my life and I came out better for it. But here's the recent thing I've been shown, which I'm calling the flip side of the coin. Our design is polarity, and something our twin flame experience teaches us, at least it did for me, is that there is wholeness in ourselves, but our design is the shared soul with another human being. That is so profound. I mean, it's so mind-blowing. It's so mind-blowing. It's so mind-blowing that when I first started trying to understand what that meant, I couldn't get my mind around it. I kept trying to think my way through it. And I talked about this in my first video, knowing you were one soul with your twin flame. I thought of him as my soul in another body, and in his circumstances, me in his circumstances, his mind, body, and emotions, his conditioning. That's who I would be if I was in his experience. And at that time, I really didn't have the understanding and awareness that I do now. And this was just the start of my journey. Like, I didn't understand the ego and how there are so many things tapping in on this. And I often think some people miss this, really understanding what sharing your soul with another human being is. And I'm sure I don't fully understand it either, but I think many people still really just think of them as another person, someone separate from them. Like, it just doesn't sink in. And that's so obvious with the wording that's often used in the twin flame community and the fear about our other experiencer. And having that fear does serve us to an extent. But I also think with growth and trusting in your journey and your divinity, you begin to let go of that fear, which is another form of surrendering because we trust, we know they share our soul. And whatever my soul created for me to discover, I'm open to it. That is so freeing. But it wasn't until I received a vision during meditation, which I talk about in that first video, knowing your one soul, that my mind could actually process that. And that vision really helped me to see it in my own way, the way that it just really clicked for me, the way that it sunk in. And this actually makes me think of something else. A while back, I came across people sharing that polarity is of the ego, that there's no polarity at the soul level, at the 5D level. I do understand how we label things as being polar, how we identify them, but I still disagree with that. Polarity is in everything, in my belief. It is in source creation because it's in polarity that infinite creation can even exist. If there was no polarity, even to the level of duality, a singularity would be just that, a singularity. And there would be nothing else. It's in oneness. I mean, we're not being shown oneness so we can all be the same, so we can all be one without polarity. No, that's against oneness. We're ascending to oneness in our polarity. I sometimes use the quote from the movie The Incredibles where Dash and Helen are having a discussion, and Dash says, "But Dad always said our powers are nothing to be ashamed of. Our powers made us special." And Helen tells them, "Everyone is special, Dash." And then Dash replies, which is another way of saying no one is. If that's the beauty of oneness, that loving each other for our uniqueness, like that's the oneness. It's coming into that unity through the polarity and appreciating and coming together in our differences. And I don't claim to fully understand it all, but in my experience so far, I've got a hint of my own divinity through my self-love. And through that, I've learned to open my heart to others, or I'm learning, I should say, I'm learning. And in that fifth dimensional consciousness of unity, I can experience oneness. Oneness is a higher vibrational connection with everyone. How I talk about our shared consciousness flowing through our chakras and how we can share sensations with each other, that capability is there with everyone through our merge with higher consciousness. And I hope to discuss something that came to me while I was doing the video, A Unique Balance. And it's about that, sensing others through that 5D consciousness path. And I think that, it's all sounds science fiction-y, But I believe that's what we're moving towards through this 5D consciousness, or in this 5D consciousness. And this is what my guidance is taking me to understanding. We're not meant to be alone. That's the flip side of the coin. The spiritual side of this journey and the physical side. That's why we're shown that spiritual love. Our divine energy, we're given that divine energy when our soul recognizes itself in our other experiencer. It's why we go through the ego check so we can find our unique balance. Oh, I mean, a lot of everything, there's no one side to anything that we go through in the twin flame journey. Let me just go ahead and say that. All of this, there are many reasons why it all happens. But one reason is, we go through this so we can find our unique balance between our ego and our intuition. And that's going to be different for everyone because your physical design, your mind, body, and emotions is different from mine, just like my twins is different from mine. But it's there in every part of this journey. And even, when we think we're going through this alone, and this is one of the really big differences from other spiritual journeys, we're not alone. We're not meant to be. But while I was going through bridging, learning, balancing, walking my unique path, my other experiencer was with me. My twin flame was with me. I mean, there has never been one single second that I didn't feel him. It's why I thought he planted a camera in my house the last time he was here, because I couldn't shake the feeling of his presence and that he was constantly watching me. I mean, yeah, I thought it was ridiculous, but it was such a strong feeling that at first, I kept searching, just looking under everything, in vents even. And I just, wherever I could think that he could have possibly planted a tiny camera. And even months later, periodically, I would still search because it's just like, I can't believe I still feel this way. And, I'd never experienced that like that before. It's why we're able to experience telepathic communication, because we're not alone. It's why I always had answers come from my higher self that I couldn't find anywhere else, because I wasn't alone. It's why those songs, those signs, synchronicities come in. They're a part of that not being alone. And guess what? My twin gets that too. It's how we're motivated by them and our higher self, which is our truth. Like one time, probably 6 months or so into my journey, when I was driving to work, the song Tribe by Pink was playing. And I was kind of up and down with doubt during that time. Um, I was having a bit of doubt that day that I would ever see him again, and it felt heartbreaking. And part of me wanted to just give up on the idea of him, but the song played, and I heard the words, "Where there is desire, there is going to be a flame." And I know that's not the context of the song exactly what I'm getting ready to say, but I told myself, he is my flame. He is my flame. He's my desire. He's my motivation. He's my inspiration. And it was just so unexpected and clear. My higher self said, "And you're his." And I had a little trouble seeing the road after that for the tears that welled up in my eyes, because that gave me such strength, because I'd heard that over and over from my intuition in different ways, that he is a part of this. And even from the very, very beginning, as soon as activation kicked in and I was feeling that intense energy, my higher self kept telling me, it's mutual, it's mutual. And this was well before I'd heard anything about twin flames. And that doesn't even matter. Like, that part of it doesn't even matter. I know what my inner being told me, and I trust that. And there's not anything anyone can ever tell me, and I will not ever think differently. I know it was happening for him too, and I even got to witness some of that. But then there was a point where I could have treated it like any other situation and let the fear guide me, and I did on a lot of things. But it was like I was being given support where it was needed, like just that knowing that he felt it too. I wanted to doubt it, but something in me just wouldn't let me. So, going back to something I said earlier in the video, this journey is teaching us to first love ourselves, to turn inwardly. But the reason we have a counterpart, again, one of the reasons, because all of this, there's so many different sides to it. But a big reason is to teach us to love ourselves in another who is our natural polarity, who can often be dualistic to us in our imbalanced states. And some are trying like hell to deny the feeling of needing their other self from either side. That can come from either side, um, you or them. And this is where I was being shown something else, something else I feel is moving me forward. And as you've probably gathered for yourself, this journey can take one thing, just like I was saying, and show it to you or take you through it one way and then come back and show you another side. And it can do this again and again and again. And this is what this is. It's understanding that energy felt during activation and even afterwards when it began to calm, but it still stayed with me. It just transmuted and it's still with me more than a year and a half later. And I know I experienced all of that for different reasons, which I've discussed in other videos, but I can also now see that I experienced that so I can recognize that we are designed to humbly rely on each other sometimes, not in an unhealthy way, but with vulnerability, with truth and love, openness of heart and mind. That's the flip side of the coin. Our design is the whole coin, the whole soul. We have our spiritual essence and our physical nature. We have two bodies. Two bodies. That's another human being that I share my soul with. That's two sides of the coin that are one whole. And as I'm writing this, I'm listening to music, and the song "Take on Me" by Aha came on. Because I come back and do the video, I have to write it out, otherwise I'll be all over the place, which I kind of am anyway. um, but I felt my higher self telling me to pay attention to this song as I heard it coming on. And so I looked up the lyrics as I'm listening. And, like I know what the lyrics are, but like, what does this song even mean? I never knew what it meant exactly. I really had no idea. It's just one of those songs you sing and you don't know what it means. At least that's how I am. So I'll link the article below, but I really like this. It was by Neon Music. They conducted several interviews and said that the song is a quote, a poignant portrayal of love, vulnerability, and the yearning for a connection, end quote. And another part, it speaks to the universal feeling of being fragmented or incomplete, yet continually striving and moving forward. It's about being vulnerable and willing to take a risk for love and not giving up on your dreams. And I especially like how they discuss the video design too. They talk about how there's the transition at the end from the comic world, because if you remember, they have the moving sketch in the video, like he's the moving sketch, and at the end he transitions from the sketch world to the real world. And I compared this to being in that place of self-love in my soul where I'm open and honest with who I am with those that I encounter on both sides of the coin, being my imperfect human self and loving me and others as just that. And again, it made me well up in tears, because that's both sides of a coin. That's the transition, that bringing the spiritual and physical together through being in our soul, and allow others in to experience that with you. And I think once we're able to do that from a place of absolute authenticity, we will feel a huge shift in our journey and it will fully reflect in our lives.